left the left screenshot there with the rec sites and red rectangles. And then, like many public land agencies, a significant jump in visitation to really all developed recreational landscapes during COVID. I don't have stats handy for post 2020 at the moment, but so statewide and starting to drill into the Northwest region and the Baker to Bellingham Rec Plan. So many of you probably know, and has been mentioned today, the 2024 DNRs out or strategic plan, outdoor access responsible rec plan, was produced and signed last year. That drives rec planning priorities for the agency across the state. And then beneath that, those broad priorities and commitments are the landscape level rec plans. And today we're going to be talking about Olsen Creek State Forest within the context of the Baker to Bellingham rec plan. So, and on the left there, there's a screenshot from the Baker to Bellingham rec plan. It's available online on the DNR's website. We have the rec planning area that's covered within that. And then Olsen Creek State Forest is the smallest yellow blob there on the left side. Baker District, Andrew and I work in, is kind of the top third to half of Northwest region there. So it's a good overview map. Moving on. So some details of the Baker to Bellingham non-motorized rec plan. It was completed in 2019, signed by the Commissioner of Franz at that time. That provides guidance like many rec plans for public use, a broad spectrum of public use, both dispersed, what we call dispersed, and then developed recreation, where we've actually implemented and designated sites. And it doesn't have a hard expiration, but essentially the next 10 to 15 years starting in 2019. On the right there, there's a good screenshot of the rec plan's concept map. And there's a lot going on there, but there's a number of landscapes that are identified at a high level for different modes of recreation. And then we've got Olsen Creek on the left side here, the west side, adjacent to some local county parkland and some other priorities identified in that rec plan. And I've highlighted the screenshot from the rec plan on the left there. Some of the tier 1 or top level priorities that were established with public input. Is highlighted right there. Steward Mountain is the mountain complex that Olsen Creek is a part of. So identifying and actualizing connections with adjacent lands, and then obviously implementing the rec plan and trail plan there. I will say that the Baker to Bellingham rec plan was developed with a high level of community engagement, many public meetings that later morphed into rec committees and focus groups. All the outreach that was done, included local public land managers, tribal governments, citizens, advocacy groups, and it's noteworthy that off-road vehicle use is excluded from this. That's actually prohibited in Whatcom County due to county codes for commercially zoned forest lands. So that is not included in the non-motorized rec plan. So just want to give that context for what's driving the priorities at Olsen Creek and why it was a priority. Moving on to, actually, just add real quick before we move on, the reason why Olsen Creek has been such a strong priority as part of the rec plan is its proximity to the city of Bellingham, the existence of a prior user-built trail system is pretty expansive, and some of the natural resource and water quality concerns related to Lake Whatcom. So it was kind of a slam dunk to identify Olsen Creek as the first landscape to work on under this rec plan, and just the accessibility and existing impacts there and the presence of a county trailhead. So keep moving on here, see if Andrew jumps in.
Hopefully my audio and video is working all right. I had to jump out there for a second. Thanks for your patience. A real quick landscape overview of Olsen Creek State Forest, which is where we're focusing on today. It encompasses about 3,575 acres or so of working forest land, meaning that it is used as timber harvest land to generate revenue for the trust beneficiaries. We currently have a little bit over 7 miles of trail built out and renovated. It's all on the north side of Olsen Creek. You can see in the image there. In the left image, we got Olsen Creek right in the middle, bisecting it horizontally. All the build-out's been on the north side, with additional plans over the next biennia to build out an additional 17 miles on the south side of the creek that will eventually connect all the way around the watershed, creating a pretty sweet loop for multi-use recreation. And we'll go to the next slide. So just a real quick background on the Lake Whatcom watershed. Lake Whatcom, pictured there in the image, is the city of Bellingham's drinking water source. And in 1998, it was put on a statewide list of polluted water bodies, primarily due to low dissolved oxygen content. Like most bodies of water, stormwater runoff and erosion can mobilize phosphorus. Therefore, the county and city came up with restrictions for when when anybody in the area is allowed to move soil or disturb soil. So we currently have a seasonal disturbance window for disturbing soil from June 1st to September 30th, which was 2 days ago, of course. So we were hustling to move as much dirt as we could in a sustainable way. But what that does is it really severely limits our ability to build sustainable trail, and it increases the amount of time needed. So that's one of the challenges that we run into over there at Olsen Creek. We can go to the next slide.
Okay, a little history of that landscape, Olsen Creek watershed. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a long-standing history of what was effectively an unmanaged trail system prior to recent years, at least 10 miles of user-built trails, very likely more. Say equestrians were historically the strongest user group there, but that's changed in recent years prior to even our development work. Like I mentioned earlier, there has been a county access point for many, many years, shown in this image here on the bottom left, the gray. That was actually the old landfill site that I think kind of organically turned into a parking lot. So there's been facilitated access to this DNR landscape for a long time. And like I alluded to, that informed our tier 1 priority. Proximity to urban center, like many landscapes, increases in user conflict where there weren't separated uses. This photo on the left here is pretty charismatic. That's the infamous ladder bridge over the main stem of Olsen Creek. This was a user-built structure, and this is the result of it after the November 2021 atmospheric river. So a more charismatic image, but shows pretty clearly like that was an improvement without any concern for resource impacts. So move on to the next slide here. So community engagement, I highlighted a bit of the community engagement that happened during the rec plan development, but during the planning and ongoing development of Olsen Creek, it's been critical, as I quoted here, early and often to engage any stakeholder. Focus groups were started early in 2020, February of 2020, that informed at a high level priorities around trailhead development, which we've not pursued yet in earnest, and trail systems. So routing, separate uses, destinations, all that good stuff early on in the process. And then we still have a recreation committee that was started that year that's ongoing and has rotating members as is common, but some neighbors, a natural resource expert, local advocacy groups such as Washington Trail Association, Walk Mountain Bike Coalition, and the like. And just a screenshot of one of those early agendas there. So the early and often is really key. It's not a one and done. I'm really using the word incremental in this presentation. And so ongoing conversations are essential, and partnerships on the ground. So a little bit more about the process. On the left, there's an early concept map that was created for one of the community meetings after trail assessments were done, those initial landscape assessments. And there's this example on the right of the evolution of that vision as part of our SEPA permit application, which we did cover on the next slide, but SEPA was done for the entire landscape, and then we permit incrementally as we pursue development. So like is pretty common, trails inventory thoroughly done in 2020 at a high level, unstable slopes, where do we want to route or avoid or retain trails? And then, like I mentioned, the old landfill site adjacent, we did some surface soil contamination exploration that did not result in anything, but needed to do that upfront assessment work. So continuing on in the assessment design permitting process, meeting with those partner groups initially, we identified these priorities. Pretty common, a key priority, reducing natural resource impacts. Andrew commented on Lake Whatcom and the strong driver, I guess, to our work that creates. constructing trails to modern standards, management for multiple uses in modern ways, and separating downhill traffic, and designing a system that can actually be permitted, built, and used incrementally in a practical way. If we can't pursue or receive funding in the future, can we want what we've completed so far to be useful and stand alone by itself if need be. And then just wanted to highlight that trail management objectives, I think that's a pretty common tool many of you are familiar with. We've adapted that from the Forest Service. That was used as a prescriptive tool for every trail. So these design parameters were identified up front. They're a little bit of a reflection of the construction approach, but we use TMOs as a driver for trail standards and to ensure that whoever's doing the construction, partner groups, DNR staff, et cetera, that we're building the same standards across there. And then it is also a required component of the DNR's trail designation process. So just wanted to touch on that part of the development and planning. Continuing on that, upfront planning costs are pretty significant in general, I think, these days in the trails world, but particularly because of some county requirements and the Lake Whatcom requirements. We do and continue to use architecture and engineering contractors and subcontractors. Obviously, they expand our capacity. They can help facilitate permits, join pre-app meetings, all the good stuff, and recruit their expertise. We can't delineate wetlands, but they can. These list of permits, or pretty exhaustive permits and other deliverables, are required for essentially all of the development work that we're doing here, regardless of what the project is. Some of the larger projects, such as a 75-foot pedestrian bridge that we envision down here at the lower main stem of Olsen Creek, that requires some additional permits. But these are all requirements, including mitigation plantings that we've had to do where trails, existing trails that we may wanted to retain that go through critical areas or their buffers. We wouldn't necessarily cite them there new, but there's value in retaining them. And so we do have to do mitigation afterwards for that, those impacts. So, Andrew?
So, and after all of this trail assessment, the design, and the permitting process, we get to do the actual trail construction and renovation. We get starting in 2023, the DNR build out began renovating what we call Priority Area 1 at Olsen Creek, which is on the north side of Olsen Creek, shown in the image there, up on the right there. We did this with our own staff, but also utilized work orders with partner groups. This helps support valued community organizations, expand our own capacity, recruit expertise, and outsource our volunteer management, which is extremely helpful. During this process, we of course abided by all of our hydraulic project approval and landfill and grade permit guidelines. And this was a mix of both new trail construction and realignment and renovation, like Mike's mentioned, of existing user-built equestrian and downhill mountain biking trails. And then additionally, with the type of construction that we can do, we can actually get some machines like small, like mini excavators and toters and things along those lines that really help us build out a significant amount and bulk amount of work. And then that allows us to come back with DNR staff or with partner groups to do all that finish work, the high quality finish work by hand, which there's an example of that in the upper right hand photo there of some WATA volunteers standing over some trail that was built by machine and then finished by hand. It's really a great tandem that we have there. And let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about some of our partners. The first one we'll touch on is the Washington Trails Association. The DNR established work orders with a couple of different partners for the 2023-2025 biennium. And the goal was to enhance mountain biking, hiking, and equestrian opportunities on all of our DNR managed lands, utilizing volunteer, paid labor, and that to renovate existing trail and construct that new trail in Priority Area 1, all non-motorized, just like Mike had said. And WTA was absolutely instrumental in the development of the trail system there. Got a couple photos of them up there on the left as a whole group of WTA volunteers standing over some tread work that they were working on earlier this summer, or maybe spring. And then on the right there, we have a photo of a collaborative project between the Backcountry Horsemen of Washington and the Washington Trails Association, where this specific photo on the right there is adjacent to a critical area where they built up the tread and kind of corralled and cribbed things to make sure that we didn't have extra sediment or any sediment delivering to those critical areas. And with WTA, I'd just like to give a special shout out to Arlen and Justine and Mike, all from the Northwest region up here, for their extremely helpful assistance in coordinating volunteers and their actual hands-on work in the field. It's tough to do these things without them. Let's check out another one of our partners, which would be the Backcountry Horsemen of Washington. They contributed over 300 hours of paid and volunteered labor to the trail system over the last biennium. Led by Tim Van Beek. Hopefully Tim's out there. Shout out to Tim. Thank you for all of the help and coordination and solidarity throughout the summer and throughout the last couple of years. They worked on culverts and building up tread throughout the multi-use trail system. Were extremely helpful. There's the image on the right there shows that the finished product of that collaborative project between WTA and the Backcountry Horsemen for that area right there, which is looking really good. It's holding up really well. Let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about another one of our partners, which is the Whatcom Mountain Bike Coalition. This group was absolutely instrumental in helping construct and renovate and realign over 2 miles of downhill mountain biking trail of intermediate difficulty or blue. Special shout out to Ben Cruz and James Pulse. Without their help, this would not nearly be as fun and safe and enjoyable and sustainable to ride. So big shout out to them. And we also have some other partners, like on the next slide, which would be our WCC or our Washington Conservation Corps crew members. They were also absolutely instrumental at developing new trail and conservation stewards, and also creating the work that we had for them, or finishing the work that we had for them. At Olsen Creek, we had 2 crews that put in a significant amount of time, both the Hearst crew and the Rosin crew, who helped implement our sign installation plan to help aid recreators with navigation and safety and things along those lines. The Hearst crew specifically really helped us quite a bit with what we call the number 10 bridge, which we'll cover on later slides. A couple photos of that and a little coverage of that. And the Rosin crew helped with felling some small cedar trees to create some railings for our number 10 bridge. Like I said, we'll cover that in a couple slides here. But big shout out to them. Really, without all of these partners, that incremental progress would be much less. So big shout out to them. On the next couple slides, we'll cover a couple of projects that we've been working on throughout the summer. This one right here is a turnpike project that we've been working on throughout the summer. This is the foreshot. This is on the Lower Hedgehog Trail, which is our multi-use trail for equestrian hikers and bikers. It's only allowed for uphill bike use, no downhill bike use there. But you can see it was there was some challenging sediment conditions there, some challenging soil conditions, and it was all obviously getting pretty soggy there. So over the last 2 months, we've been working pretty hard, and we've got a finished product, or at least ready for the winter, which is on our next slide here. So we go from muddy, and we go to a little bit more of a tread buildup. We've got some turnpike action going on there, cribbing in all of that fill there, and then we've got some nice ditching on the outside that we're really hoping decreases the amount of mud and slop right there. It's gonna really help with the beginning of our trail system, which we're excited about. Another project that we did is the number 10 bridge, which I'll let Mike talk about here.
Yeah, so this is a good example. That photo on the right shows the existing user-built trail. The unprotected stream crossing is kind of a little hard to make out there, but so this is a good natural resource protection example that we did retain the I guess, the bones of that segment of the user-built trail, but this is the example of bringing them up to modern standards. I will say the best bridge is no bridge at all in terms of cost and complexity in that, but sometimes they are warranted. Our agency leans on and defers to Forest Service plans like many do. So there's kind of a snapshot of the cover page there of what this structure will look like when it's completed. Yeah, we will be milling some local Western red cedar that's harvested down material, things like that, for the railings to save money on that and use local materials. So this is a good project. Many hands have gone into it. That's about all I'll say there.
Additionally, an enormously important part of our trail construction and newly designated trail system, it's kind of like the icing on top of the cake, I feel like, is to put up the signs to make sure that folks are navigating the trail system safely, know where they are, and abiding by all the directional use that we have, because we do have separated uses for downhill mountain biking away from equestrian and hiker trails. So that was a really important component of getting the newly designated trail system up off the ground. WCC, the Washington Conservation Corps, was extremely helpful in getting all of these signs up. Additionally, we've got an official map that's up on the web. It's up posted throughout the trail system, which took a lengthy amount of time to produce, but was well worth it because of the amount of eyes and perspectives and revisions that we did to get a great product, which is out in the field now. And it's like all of this trail construction, all of those partner groups and everything, that's all completed after all of that planning. It's created after planning, after we get funding and things like that. And we'll cover that on the next slide here.
Okay, so I've been really highlighting the incremental progress aspect of this overall development initiative, really from project origination in 2020 through the end of this last biennium. There, approximately $950,000 of total cost. There's definitely some cost not recognized in that from like our recreation division support, and Washington Conservation Corps is not in there. That comes to us, or came to us, as no cost to the regions or to a specific development project. So, and a significant amount of that cost is the upfront planning, environmental assessments, permitting, all that we're subject to there. Like most state programs, we have a mix of legislatively approved capital funding requests. Sometimes we can reappropriate unused funding from other DNR projects that may not have utilized it. A NOVA grant we have for the 75-foot bridge, the key funding component for that sub-project, I'll call it. And then, of course, volunteerism, past and present and ongoing. Like this year, we weren't able to enter into paid work orders with our partner groups, but Walk 'em Out by Coalition is still participatory in maintaining the downhill trails, and we still have a strong partnership there as well, as with WTA. Challenges, this is probably not new to any of you, but the lean state budget environment and uncertainty present and in the future adds some questions there. What will we be able to do next biennium or the biennium after that? Will we be able to complete the entire trail system and connectivity around the watershed? I really can't emphasize enough the coincidence of the Lake Whatcom land disturbance period and the end and start of our biennia adds great complexity and limitation to this project. If the legislature runs long in the spring, maybe the agency doesn't get a approved budget until after July 1st, and then it could take months to get spending plans. And so that makes it very challenging to enter into a work order, to start work on June 1st if you don't know your budget until later. So odd number years are very hard to get any substantial field work or new development work done in the Lake Whatcom watershed, but we work with what we've got, and we really focus on even number years. And then we did unfortunately lose agency-wide Washington Conservation Corps time, and like Andrew highlighted, they were a pretty key extension of our workforce in the field. So we miss them a lot, and they contributed a lot. So we'll be dealing with that limitation as well. So, and the incremental progress part, again, like as funding comes in, we've done the high level planning, SEPA permitting, and then we'll incrementally do the local and final permitting for developments as funding is available and we have that capacity. So that's the incremental part as well. Then yeah, thanks for listening. Looks like we do have a couple minutes for questions, and we did put our email addresses up there, so feel free to jot those down, shoot us any emails with follow-up questions. We're happy to answer that. But if there is time, we'll be happy to field a couple questions now.
I think in the, oh, I think Mike, oh. Thank you, Mike and Andrew, for presenting. I think in the spirit of just getting back on schedule, we're gonna skip questions for now, but please feel free to reach out to Mike and Andrew directly. And thank you again for sharing about the Olsen Creek Trails.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity.
And for our last session before the lunch break, I'd like to welcome up the folks on the Federal and State Tribal Recreations Impact Initiative panel. So if you all would like to